About a year ago, I reviewed the Creative Outlier Air. These true wireless earbuds, which cost around £100, around $100 at the time making the video, were among some of the best sounding earbuds I'd heard to date, specifically given their price tag. Now, a year on, Creative have now announced the Creative Outlier Air V2. In fact, this is technically the V3 because there is the Outlier Air Gold as well, which is essentially the same as the V1, just with increased battery life and Super X-Fi technology built in. Now the V2 takes on from its predecessors and comes in at even an affordable price range, which is at around £65 in the UK and around $70 in the US. Now if you're interested in purchasing these earphones or indeed some of its alternatives and competitors, do check out in the links in the description below. The locally link will take you to your localized Amazon store. And also down there you'll find a link to my Instagram. It's at TotallyDubbed, so if you do use that social media platform, do follow me for my shenanigans. And furthermore, if you're interested in all electric or hybrid vehicles, check out Totally EV. Your support would be greatly appreciated. So first off, what you get in the box is pretty simple. You got the earbuds themselves and their case, and you've got a selection of ear tips and a USB Type-C to Type-A cable. Now, first off, in terms of battery life, these earbuds will go up to 34 hours, including the case. The earbuds themselves on a singular charge will give you up to 12 hours, which is a definite step up over their variant 1. And it's great to see this because, well, they just basically take on from what the Creative Outlier Air Gold had and now kind of, well, give you kind of a somewhat in between. In terms of charging, it'll take about 1 to 2 hours to charge to full, and that's because it's got the USB Type-C input. Now, another thing I want to talk about is the ear tips themselves. Now, the ear tips have changed and means that some people will actually prefer this because, well, they are more like regular ear tips. Instead of having this kind of like mushroom type of shape, they have a little bit more of a kind of deeper insertion. So therefore, it means the isolation has improved a little bit. So therefore, passive noise isolation, and yes, they don't have any active noise cancellation features, have improved, and yet the shape hasn't changed at all, so you can see that. Now what you will notice is this flashing lights. These flashing lights do get disabled when you do pair up to a phone, but right now I've disabled my Bluetooth just to avoid any music playing in the background just in case for copyright. And also furthermore that the earphones have now got touch sensitive buttons. Now one of my biggest complaints with the Outlier V1 is their buttons were a little bit hard to press, whereas that's no longer the case because now, well, you've got touch sensitive buttons. Now the touch sensitive pads themselves on both earbuds are very responsive and actually provide you all the controls you'll need, so you can play, pause, skip and previous, volume up and down, and all of that works really flawlessly and had no issues whatsoever. In comparison to other earphones out there on the market which have touch sensitive pads, these are among the better sets. We have integrated touch sensitive buttons, so that's really nice to see. Also, you can see that the design has changed, not only from its case, which has changed to a kind of like a darkish blue, a navy blue, but also the earbuds themselves have now this kind of blue metallic kind of finish. I'm not sure if my camera picks it up, but nevertheless, what I will say is that it does look really nice in ear. It's not too flamboyant, neither is it, well, just black looking, so therefore gives it a little bit of a touch of style, and I think this will appeal to both females and males out there. I think they'll like the design of the Creative Outlier Air V2. Now elsewhere, these earphones have IPX5 certification, which essentially means that they'll be sweat proof and rain proof. But the biggest thing for me over here is due to their change of design in terms of the ear tips, it means that these earphones will be a lot more suitable for those people who are taking them for jogs or going to be going on a run or something like that, or doing some sort of physical exercise. Whilst the V1 would often slip out if you're going to go for more strenuous exercises, the V2 seems to fit a little bit more snugly, at least in my ears. And of course you've got the different ear tips if you want to adjust the size depending on your ear canal. So what I really like about this is that they are a little bit more recommended for those people who want to do workouts, whilst the same couldn't really be associated or said if you had the regular V1. Now the earphones also come with Super X-Fi, and I'll be touching upon this in terms of the audio quality section, but it's just worth bearing in mind and showing you the app. So it's pretty simple because when it does register with your Bluetooth device, it means that it's picked it up and therefore it means you can play your music. Now when it comes to playing music, you've got a Super X5 button over here which you can enable or disable, and this changes kind of the spaciousness. Before doing that, you will need to do a head mapping, so in other words taking a picture of your ear and your head, and in order to give you a kind of more accurate sound profile. The issue I found over here is the fact that this only really works when you're going to be working through the app. If you take it past the app, then what happens is that the Super X5 technology doesn't work, at least not from my tests and not from my experience, which I found slightly odd. Furthermore, the same could be applied with the equalizer, so you can EQ it, and I would very much suggest taking a bit off the highs, and I'll touch upon that in just a bit. But again, this will only apply if you're in the app, and if you were to save it, again, it just doesn't apply if you're out the app, which I feel is a little bit of an oversight, because if you're going to be using these earphones with different devices, then you're not going to benefit from the Super X5 technology unless you have that Super X5 technology also installed on these other devices, which might not always be the case, for example, if it's like, let's say, a work laptop. And now we get onto performance, and first off, let's talk about recording quality or call quality, which is said to have been improved over the Variant 1. And I can safely say that the Creative Outlier V2 have definitely got better call quality, purely because it does isolate my voice over ambient noise. While I'm in a silent room right now, I can tell you from experience of walking alongside a road that the Creative Outlier V2 do a better job and have a little bit more emphasis on the mid-range. By comparison, here are the Creative Outlier V1, so you can hear for yourselves the difference in terms of call quality. Hopefully you'll agree with me with what I just said, that these sound just a little bit more muffled, and as I mentioned, if you're going to be in a noisy environment, these will isolate your voice just a little less than the V2, so it's definitely an improvement in this domain. Now, while it is an improvement over the V1 in comparison to something like the Jabra Elite 75T, which in my opinion are one of the class-leading earphones when it comes to call quality, they just simply can't compete. So obviously keep your expectations in check. The fact that you are paying more of a budget price, you should expect more of a budget performance in terms of call quality over more premium earphones like the Jabra Elite 75T, which will be better for people who take calls on a more regular basis. And now we get on to sound quality. Now first off, I want to talk about Bluetooth codec support. It's here, nothing has really changed over the Variant 1. You've still got the aptX support, and you've also got AAC. Of course, you can revert to SBC if for some reason your device doesn't support either of those codecs, which shouldn't be the case. But I had no issues when it comes to lip sync delays or any sort of video lag, so worth bearing that in mind, very much like the original predecessors. In terms of connectivity issues, I know some people back in the Variant 1 had some issues. I didn't have any problems, and very much the same case was with the V2s. No issues when it comes to connectivity, be it between the earbuds themselves, be it from placing them in the case, or be it from connecting to my smartphone, which is the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. Now, before breaking it down in terms of the overall sound frequencies, there is something that does stick out, and I think some people will notice this. Essentially, I'm not sure if this is due to the mics or in terms of how the earphones have kind of been tuned and tailored, which is slightly different over the V1. It's the fact that these earphones have a little bit of hissing sound, and it is audible. You can hear it in the background, and it's pretty much constant. As soon as there is anything transmitting between the earphones and the phone, you can hear an audible hiss. Now, I did notice this back in the day with the RHA True Connect, and I noticed this with some other earphones out there on the market, and some modern day earphones also have this kind of issue. Whilst I didn't really expect this to have problem with the Creative Outlier V2, not to this extent, where in comparison to Creative Outlier V1, you can definitely hear a massive difference in terms of like the white noise that you can hear in the background. So that kind of hissing sound is not really pleasant, specifically if you're going to watch, let's say, quieter content, or if you're going to be playing and pausing content, because if you play something, you probably won't notice the hiss. When you pause something, then you will hear the hiss in the background, and then the hiss disappears after the earphones realize there's no sort of signal going between it and your phone. So I tested this on two separate devices, and I can confirm that the Creative Outlier V2 does suffer from hiss, so something worth bearing in mind as we're moving into the sound quality section. Speaking of which, in terms of the audio quality, I was actually pleasantly surprised to see that the Creative Outlier V2 do sound a little bit different over the V1. A little bit is actually an understatement. They've got a little bit of a different sound signature. While the V1 had more of a bassy, warm sound, the V2 have a more of a well, more mid-centric sound, so therefore vocals come out a little bit better and they don't sound as recessed and pushed back as they did with the V1, which is at this price range pretty impressive because often you don't have an earphone that's a little bit more balanced. You find earphones which are either too bassy, or you find earphones which are just too overly accentuated to have no bass life whatsoever or any bass presence. In this case, the V2 has a nice overall sound signature, so let's break it down. In terms of the sub bass, it doesn't rumble as low as the V1, but it still has that presence. You can of course EQ it if you so wish. In terms of the mid bass, it's present, it's tight and controlled, and it doesn't sound overly wobbly in comparison to the V1s, which had more of a kind of wobbly mid-bass tone. This is namely due to the fact that the mid-bass is kind of being reduced and seduced, if let's say. In terms of the mids, they are a little bit more forward sounding, and don't get me wrong, they will still sound recessed in comparison to more expensive earbuds on the market, but in its price category, or in the sub £100, $100 category, the mid-range is actually really good and pretty pleasant to my ears. As for the highs, they are a little bit accentuated and a little bit sibilant. So in comparison to the V1, which sounded a little bit more V-shaped or even U-shaped, you could say, the V2s sound a little bit more accentuated in those highs because the mids have received a boost, and therefore I feel that the trebles kind of received a boost as well. Now, while you could EQ this via the SFXI app, the problem is that the SFXI app doesn't really translate to normal apps if you take it outside of the app, if that makes sense. So therefore you'd have to use a third-party app in order to EQ it. In my case, I have Power Amp, which I listen to music for, and I have no issues there, but then if I went to the YouTube app to listen to music on there, then I wouldn't be able to benefit from that EQ difference. Hopefully that makes sense. If you've got questions of what I'm trying to say over here, ask me down in the comments below. Ultimately, what I'm trying to say over here is that the earphones are a little bit sibilant and a little bit harsh sounding, specifically if you crank them up. As for the soundstage, this was one of the major talking points I had about the Creative Outlier V1, and till this day there's only certain earphones that produce such a wide and deep soundstage reproduction, and that would be such as the Sennheiser True Wireless Momentum 2, which are about £200, $200 more expensive than these Creative Outlier V1s. The same case could be said about the V2. Nothing has changed in this department, and it's fantastic. You've got great instrument separation, you've got great width and depth, meaning that music sounds alive and feels wholesome. It doesn't feel close sounding like you'd have with the Galaxy Buds, and it doesn't sound, well, artificial in any sort of manner. I think here is where the Creative Outlier Air's V2s or even V1s really shine in comparison to its competitors, because again, till this day, especially at its price range, there's no other earphones that can really compete with it unless you're paying, premium top dollar earphones, at which point you would expect that sort of clarity and openness in terms of the soundstage. And finally, to conclude the overall sound quality, it is worth bearing in mind you've got the Super X-Fi technology that's built in. Now, Super X-Fi technology is trying to replicate kind of speakers in your ears, and it does have some sort of adverse effect in terms of the mid-range and high, specifically on true wireless earbuds such as the Outlier Air Gold or the Outlier V2. But what I will say here is that the experience is pretty unique and it sounds pretty nice. It's much better than, let's say, Dolby Atmos integration or Dolby 7.1 integration, which really does skew sound to a completely nth degree and makes it sound a bit too artificial. Here it sounds like you are listening to speakers, like you're sitting in like a hi-fi room and listening to speakers, and I do appreciate the feature. Some people will hate it, some people will love it. Of course, you can enable that toggle. The problem over here is the fact that, as far as I'm aware, you can only have this while listening to music within the Super X-Fi app itself. Unlike some of the other creative products which have the integration within the chipset, it just doesn't seem to be the case with the Outlier Air V2, whereby if you were to go, let's say, on YouTube or let's say on Spotify or something like that, then you wouldn't have that spaciousness sound. Instead, it would only be limited to the app itself. And again, same goes with the EQ. As I mentioned before, you can EQ the earphones, but this will only be applicable within the app, which I find a little bit strange, and I'm not sure if I'm missing something over here, but ultimately that's my experience, and I thought to share that with you. And this all leads me on to my verdict. What do I make about these true wireless earbuds? Well, in terms of a design standpoint and also in terms of fit and isolation, I think they've done a fantastic job. In terms of battery battery life, it's been improved, so this is a definite plus point. Call quality is a lot better as well, and also in terms of sound quality, it's a lot more rounded. It doesn't sound as V-shaped or warm sounding as its predecessors. But there are a few fundamental flaws, one of which is the hissing sound that you hear in the background, which will bother some people as it did for me. And also in terms of the highs, they're a little bit too accentuated, at which point if you're cranking your music a little bit louder than you should, or alternatively, if you have got sensitive hearing, then you'll find that these earphones are just a little bit too harsh for most people's ears. But if you do look past those 2 points, these earphones are still absolutely fantastic, and definitely an earphone that you should consider if you're looking for true wireless earbuds. So be it for this one, the gold variant, or even the regular V1 variant, they're all fantastic true wireless earbuds, and still till this day I would recommend all 3 of them for consumers looking for budget earbuds but don't really perform on a budget. They perform way past their price tag would suggest. As a result, these earbuds get my value award purely because, well, they're sensational value for money. They don't quite get my best buy award, which would be really associated with if these earphones didn't have any hissing, the Super X5 technology could be used past the app, and also that the highs weren't as accentuated, or at least that you could EQ it and then the app would save it through the earbuds. So that's pretty much my verdict and my thoughts about these earbuds. If you enjoyed this type of detailed review, give it a like, subscribe to see more from the channel, of course favorite and share to always help the channel grow. Alright guys, I've been Totally Dubbed, take care and bye bye.